And this episode is brought to you by Dye Real Estate and Land Company. They are the real estate agents based in Northwest Ohio that are the go-to company for people who enjoy the rural lifestyle and are looking to buy and sell some property. The whole team is amazing. I've used them in the past. I'm partial to Jaylene myself for obvious reasons, but they're all there for you whenever you need them. If you're in the market, just drop them a line at info@dyerealestate.com. That's info@dyerealestate.com. And don't forget to tell them, support your local podcast sent you.
He stuck his finger in the end of your what?
Howdy, everyone. Pull up a chair, kick up your boots, and take a sip on a nice cold Sarsaparilla.
Sarsaparilla.
What?
Well, I would write it down, but I don't figure you could read it. Sody pop.
It's Support Your Local Podcast, the show where we take a look at the 1969 Western comedy classic, Support Your Local Sheriff, one chapter at a time. I'm Robert Smith, your host, coming to you from beautiful Tombstone. Yes, that one. Today we are going to take a look at Chapter 13, A Civic Duty. But before we do that, I want to take a moment to kind of give you a lay of the land, so to speak, in regards to not just the time frame that the movie is set in, but the time frame that the movie is released in a segment that I like to call It Came in '69.
That gun had gone off, it had blown right up in the face.
Now, it wouldn't have done my finger a hell of a lot of good either, would it?
In 1869, Elizabeth Blackwell and Florence Nightingale opened the Women's Medical College in England. War and Peace was published. Ulysses S. Grant, as president, establishes the value of the greenback currency. And Harriet Tubman marries Nelson Davis. Let's jump ahead to 1969, where apparently this was a very popular year for some of the more famous people that we know today being born. Christy Turlington, an American model, was born January 2nd. Dave Grohl, American rock drummer and composer, January 14th. Mo Rocca, American humorist, journalist, and actor, January 28th. Jennifer Aniston, actress, February 11th. Pat Roach, Canadian actor, March 4th. Mariah Carey, American pop singer, March 27th. Paul Rudd, American actor, comedian, writer, and producer, April 6th. It could be joked that he was also born in 79, 89, 99, 2009, 2019, and will be born again in 2029, thus making sure that he never ages. Ice Cube, American rapper and actor, June 15th. Donnie Wahlberg, not Mark, but Donnie, American singer and actor in Saw, August 17th. Tyler Perry, September 13th. Gwen Stefani, October 3rd. Brett Favre, October 10th. Sean P. Diddy Combs, November 4th. I honestly did not know that I share a birthday with Sean P. Diddy Combs. I also apparently share a birthday with Matthew McConaughey. All right. But this has been It Came in '69. And we're back. We start our chapter, Civic Duty, with a hillside being breached with riders on horses. If you do a quick pause and count, you can see that there are 13 riders. Once again, that's an important number. Keep that in mind. That will come into play later. As the riders approach, we cut to a rowdy crowd inside some type of a meeting, and the mayor is pounding a gavel and calling for order. I assume this is a town council meeting, but we join it in progress as there is a vote for an unknown motion that only gathers 5 votes in favor. The mayor then asks for those in favor of not getting involved with the impending shootout about to befall the town between the Danby gang and the sheriff. Dozens of people stand up, some raising both hands, and the motion is carried to keep their noses out of it. And I wonder if this is a part of Robert's Rules of Order, not named after me, that came before me, if you're able to vote twice by raising both of your hands, just out of curiosity. Anyways, that's so much for the mayor convincing everyone to back the sheriff. As he promised he would do earlier, apparently they're just not willing to listen, though judging by the smiles on everybody's faces, I'm not entirely sure the sheriff put his full effort into convincing everyone. Whoop, whoop, whoop. We have our first trope alert. This is a town of cowards leaving the heroes to fight alone. This happens in quite a few westerns where the big bad is such a daunting presence that the town is more likely to just kind of keep their heads down and ignore the fact that things are going on than they are to come along and help our hero fight that. I can think of, coincidentally, I can think of The Quick and the Dead, the Sam Raimi classic, that if you haven't heard already, per the announcement that we had on social media, that will be season 2, so stay tuned for that. There's also a scene in which the town meeting votes not to support the sheriff. There's a scene in High Noon from 1952 where the town meeting basically comes to the same conclusion, less frankly. After this one, I can think of Blazing Saddles also parodies this as well, whether it's parodying this specifically or it's just like our movie and parodying that trope of westerns. But as we are trying to figure that out, Prudy enters the room and she blasts off a shotgun to get their attention. She calls the crowd cowards for not helping the sheriff, which she's absolutely accurate. She has the typical rallying speech that in any other movie would get the people reluctantly behind her. Remember when so-and-so helped you with such and such? And, inevitably the person would get a look of shame on their face and hang their head down and shake their head yes and reluctantly come to start helping. But this is a great flip of that stereotype when the councilman says that despite all the rowdiness and murder, the town wasn't that bad. I mean, what worse could have happened? It was at least a fun town. The mayor throws her out and Prudy tries to tie herself to a post. The mayor apparently knows this trick of hers and warns the crowd to stop her and throw her out. And then he says to an aside, she's always doing that, trying to tie herself to this and that. I try to figure out what scenarios come into play with this family that she, to get her way, is tying herself to things. And I also wonder what exactly the end game plan for Prudy was. So she ties herself to the post. It's not like a peaceful protest where you're handcuffing yourself to a door or a fence that is blocking somebody from doing something. This is just literally a pillar in the middle of the town hall. So I guess the threat is she's going to tie herself to the post and then they have to listen to her scream and wail from here on out. But without any food or rations or anything like that, they could easily just, avoid her or go to a different building. Perhaps down to Madame Orr's, as we find that's the secondary place for town council meetings. You'll see that soon. But anyways, as she's being thrown out of the building, she yells, "Death to tyrants." And no one really knows what that means. As the mayor says, she's always screaming death to something or another. Prudy is seen storming across the street to the sheriff's office, and she bursts in, as she did at the town council. The sheriff is sitting at his desk in his chair, and he's curiously holding a rifle pointed right at his face, looking directly down the barrel of it. Now, you may assume that he is checking it to make sure it's straight and assembled correctly. Perhaps he just got done cleaning it. But I admittedly am curious if she just stopped the sheriff from ending it all. A dark note, I know. But after all, there is a mob of people coming to kill him, and he has no help from the town. He has to know what's going to happen with the town council if he doesn't know already. The only people he has is a manure shoveler and a woman who doesn't know what permanent relationship means. So, just a thought. And maybe, going with my Latigo Smith theory, maybe Goldie and Suzanne Plachette are out looking for him and he's feeling a little trapped. As Prudy gives a rundown of how grim the scenario is, Jake comes from the back and puts in his 2 cents about maybe they can run off and go to Australia together. As Jake enters the scene, Now's a good time to finally take a look at a true Western legend, one Mr. Jack Elam, in a segment I call Remember the Name.
That's about all I'm going to do the rest of my life is go around remembering your name.
Welcome back to Remember the Name, the segment of our show where we take a bit of a deeper dive and look at some of the cast, some of the crew that made Support Your Local Sheriff possible. Today, one of the ones I'm really excited to go over again is Mr. Jack Elam. Born November 13th, 1920, he left us October 20th of 2003. Known as a legend in Westerns. Um, Look at many TV shows, movies that were Western based in the last 80 years, and Jack Elam is probably going to pop up in a majority of them. Definitely known predominantly for his look. He did have the disjointed eye look. Once you see him, you go, oh, that's Jack Elam. He's very recognizable. In doing research for this, I was very interested to find out that had happened when he was at the age of 12. He got in a altercation with a fellow Boy Scout, and a pencil got jabbed in his eye, and that's where the damage happened that gave him his iconic look. So, not to discredit the Boy Scouts, I'm sure that they do fine things. But back when he was 12, maybe they were a little bit more rough and tumble. Um, Started out in the business as a bookkeeper and as a financier. He became a bookkeeper for Samuel Goldwyn. Yes, that Goldwyn. His name is attached to MGM. That's the G in MGM, where you see the iconic lion roar at the beginning of this movie. So everything full circle. He did 2 years with the Navy in World War II. He is a veteran, much like many of the cast and crew of this movie. He got into acting um, kind of by happenstance. So again, he was a bookkeeper by trade and a very successful one from everything that I can read. But what happened was from staring at the numbers all day, it would lead him to get too much of a strain on his good eye. And his doctors recommended that he had to quit or he was going to become blind, essentially. So he had to leave his very lucrative business of financing and bookkeeping for various studios in the Hollywood business to become an actor. He did several bit parts in TV shows and westerns leading up to where we're at today. Of course, he's known for some major classics, not just Support Your Local Sheriff, but returning, of course, in the so-called sequel, Support Your Local Gunfighter. 1968, before this movie, he was one of the big bads in the train scene of Once Upon a Time in the West, the Sergio Leone classic. Also had been a member in Rawhide. He had been in The Man from Laramie, Fire Creek. After this, but before he gets into Support Your Local Gunfighter, he's in the John Wayne classic Rio Lobo. And then after this, he would continue his credits into things like Cannonball Run and other kind of weirder, zany cornball comedy. Two things that I know him predominantly from growing up. One is the TV miniseries The Sacketts, based on the Louis L'Amour series of books following the Sackett family, going through the Old West and the pioneering times and going from there. He was one of the brothers who were the villains that were battling the Sackett's Bigelows. Um, he pops up. I never got to see the series while it was on TV. My dad owned the VHS copy, and I remember it was the first thing I ever saw that actually had two VHSs together. It was that long of a miniseries, so it was super cool to have, oh my goodness, this movie stops in the middle and you have to pop the tape out and put the other one in to watch the other. But I remember him being one of the big bads at the end and noticing his eye and being kind of weirded out by it. No offense to anybody out there, but made him very memorable. And I think that's where Jack Elam comes in. Is he's a very memorable character in whatever he goes into. Obviously, then I would also know him from the two movies, Support Your Local Sheriff and Support Your Local Gunfighter. And the two roles that he has there is the cornball comedic relief, loyal but funny bumpkin, basically, is what I would go for. But the other thing that I know him from my youth, and this kind of comes full circle with the writer, or excuse me, the director of this movie, is the 1991 classic, and I'm doing the finger quotes for those that can't see it, but the 1991 Hulk Hogan classic, Suburban Commando. He plays the retired Army general who sits out in his front lawn in his Jeep drinking beer and annoying the neighbors and yelling at Ship Ramsey, the character played by Hulk Hogan. But I remember him as I first saw that movie and going, wow, I know him from somewhere. I hadn't put the connection in my head yet because I was 91. I was 9 at the time when that movie came out. But later realized, oh, yeah, that's the guy from the Sackets because that's right around the same time. And then also going back, seeing these movies, go, oh, that's him, seeing him a little bit younger, but definitely knowing who he was based on, again, that very characteristic feature of his. But yeah, Jack Elam, Western royalty, again, TV series, movies, you name a Western, there's a fairly decent chance that he might have been a part of it. Yeah, once again, Jack Elam, Western royalty, uh, great fun getting to do some digging and watching some of his old stuff. But yeah, this has been Remember the Name.
You tell him I remember his name.
We are back and we see in the background the rifle rack. Now, every Western that I've ever seen has this exact same rifle rack in the sheriff's office. I'm tempted to whoop, whoop, whoop for a trope because I can tell you in Rio Bravo and El Dorado and 20 other Westerns just off the top of my head, that exact same rifle rack's there. There's always a shotgun and then 4 or 5 rifles in it. And previously, when we saw this rifle rack while we were taking Joe to jail and etc., there was a shotgun and then 5 rifles in it. It's the same in every movie, whether there's 10 deputies or none. It's always the same setup with the same guns. What's curious here is that there are 2 rifles missing from the rack, and the sheriff is holding one, no longer in his face, but still with his finger on the trigger. Maybe he's in it for all of them. And Jake just came out of the jail portion of the office and isn't carrying one. So where did the other one go? Oh, wait, never mind. Scratch that. It then cuts to, we see the sheriff sitting at his desk and we see the butt of the other gun sitting on there. So maybe he was just checking them, or maybe whatever. Jake once again tries to in vain to get the sheriff to go to Australia with him, but alas, that's not what's going to happen. And we end our chapter with the sheriff going to grab Joe and go out with his 2 little helpers into seemingly death. He's going to go out in a blaze of glory, a la Bon Jovi. But we will have to wait to see if that is in fact what happens when we return for Chapter 14, Sheriff's Bluff. Until then, my Roberts recommends for the day. We're going to stick with my beloved Movies by Minutes group, and we are going to recommend Top Gun Minute. So, spoiler, or full disclosure, I should say, I was never a Top Gun fan. I was a little young when it came out, so I didn't really get to see it much. And truth be told, I'm not a big gearhead type of guy. So like any movie that just revolves around, oh hey, those cars are fast, or hey look, check out these planes. It's just not my bag. I've never been really into that. So I never really fell in love with Top Gun. I love me some Tom Cruise. I love most of the people in that movie. It was just never on my radar. Not to knock anybody that does love it. It's obviously a classic. But a couple of my friends in the Movies by Minutes genre, specifically Brian, shout out to Brian if you're listening, are reviewing Top Gun minute by minute, and they do a great job of giving insight into the behind the scenes of the Air Force and the Navy and how this all comes to be. So some really humorous stories of their life in the service, dealing with pilots and dealing with planes. but also a real good look at that. And obviously, it's timely with the new Top Gun Maverick coming out. Hopefully, that's their next foray. I would like to listen to that. But I can honestly say it's a great podcast, and it's actually gotten me to want to go back and watch Top Gun with a fresh set of eyes and perhaps give it another shot. So check out Top Gun Minute, available in the Movies by Minutes genre as well. But that's Robert's recommendations for this week. Until we meet again, folks, if you haven't already, please, please, please like and follow us on our social media. We are Support Your Local Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, concerns, please hit me up at suppyourlocalpodcast@gmail.com, suppyourlocalpodcast@gmail.com. Rate and review us on your podcatchers. That helps us immensely. It's free. It takes you just a minute, but helps me out greatly in getting the podcast out there and getting us moved up in the rankings so that more people can get ears on it. I appreciate that in advance. But until we meet again, I do thank you for your time. And as always, support your local podcast.
He stuck his finger in the end of your what?
Hello, I'm Robert T. Smith, host of Support Your Local Podcast. I want to take a moment to remind you to hit that fast forward button. That is, unless you want to hear about something good being done. Anyone who knows me knows that I love bowling. In 2016, I founded the Smith Family Bowling Scholarship Foundation, intended to honor my father's hard work and dedication to community service and award scholarships to youth bowlers throughout the nation. To date, we've awarded well over $15,000 in scholarships. If you are a bowler, know a bowler, have ever seen a bowler, or heard about anyone who has ever seen a video of a bowler, I'd love for you to help promote the SFBSF and its mission. Please go to sfbsf.com and see what we're all about. While you're there, please consider hitting that donate button and helping us make a brighter future for our youth. Again, that's sfbsf.com. Thank you for your time.